Hey guys, welcome to the Liberal Hive Mind, a channel solely focused on exposing the abundant hypocrisy of the left. Okay, so unless you're living under a rock, I'm sure you guys know exactly what's going on X right now. There's a huge debate, some people are calling it a fight, over the issue of H1B visas. I'll tell you, it's got the MAGA base fired up, and I know the debate seems quite dramatic, it's quite fiery, but friends, these are the tough conversations that we have to have. In fact, I think it's about time that we had this conversation, because it's been an issue and it's time that it gets addressed. People are calling this the MAGA right versus the tech right, as we have folks like Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy catching heat for their pro-H1B stances, and meanwhile the more nationalistic voices in the movement are saying enough is enough, American jobs for American workers, and of course, as per usual, the leftoids are circling around like vultures, trying to spin this into some internal collapse of the right. And you know, in a way it does feel like an operation. Let's be real here, they'd love for us to eat each other alive, but we cannot give them that satisfaction. This isn't a fracture or a collapse of the coalition, it's healthy debate and an important one. There's passion on both sides, and yeah, some of the reactions have been intense, sure, but that's what happens when people care about the future of the country. The truth is that the system is broken, and of course it's broken in a way that's detrimental to American-born workers, and having that conversation doesn't mean that the right is imploding. No, quite to the contrary. In fact, I think what's happening right now is quite healthy. This is called challenging power, or challenging the system. You know, it might get a little bit hectic sometimes, but this is exactly what a healthy society needs. A real conversation about tough topics, so let's try to do that today. We got some stuff to get into, so let's roll the tape. Okay, so let's have a conversation about these H1B visas for a second. You know, the idea behind the H1B I think is fine in theory, bring in exceptional talent to fill gaps in critical industries, but I have a feeling it's gone a little bit past its original mandate. The current system, as I mentioned earlier, feels a little bit broken. It feels like these visa programs and the visa lottery system isn't necessarily being used as a tool to attract the best and the brightest, but rather as a tool to bring in people who are just willing to work for less.
American workers are losing jobs because of a law designed to help the job market. The H1B Visa bill was written in 1990. It lets companies recruit foreign talent for emerging engineering and scientific jobs. But loopholes allow for outsourcing of American jobs to foreign workers, often at lower pay. Bill Whitaker spoke to some Americans displaced by H1B Visa workers for Sunday's 60 Minutes. They say they were asked to train workers who would take their jobs.
It wasn't called training your replacement. It was called knowledge transfer.
Craig D'Angelo worked for Northeast Utilities, now called Eversource, and was one of 220 IT workers replaced by H-1B visa employees. D'Angelo says his replacement, a worker from India, told him he was making half D'Angelo's salary with no benefits.
I didn't get laid off for lack of work. I got laid off because somebody cheaper could do my job.
We met with this group of workers who all had to train replacements. Leo Pereiro had just received high performance reviews from Disney. When he was called into a personnel meeting, he expected a raise and a promotion.
And instead,
I was given the news that in 90 days, my job was over, and I had to train my replacement. Never in my life did I imagine, until this happened at Disney, that I could be sitting at my desk and somebody would be flown in from another country, right, sit at my same desk and chair and take over what I was doing. It was the most humiliating and demoralizing thing I've ever gone through in my life.
You know, at the end of the day, it feels less like corporations are worried about bringing in world-class talents and more interested in their bottom line. And I think we've seen evidence to suggest that many of these corporations are essentially skipping over qualified Americans in favor of bringing in foreign workers who will take the job for cheaper. I don't think it's about merit as much as a lot of the tech bros are making it seem, and I think it's more about money. And at the end of the day, with this system, who gets screwed over? Well, it's the American worker. It feels almost as if the system has been rigged. Wages have been stagnant because corporations essentially have an endless supply of cheap labor at their disposal. American kids are graduating from college, racking up student debt, and then watching those jobs go to someone from halfway across the world because the company in question doesn't want to pay that high of a wage. And that's obviously a major concern, and it's a concern that I've been talking about for a really long time. If you look at other nations that rely on importing foreign labor, you can see the clear discrepancy. A software engineer in America makes a whole lot more money than a software engineer in other Western nations, and of course a lot of that has to do with the economy. You know, the scale of economy is different in America and other other nations, but that's not the only factor. If we look just north of the border, for instance, where the population I believe is roughly 40 million, per capita they import way more migrants than the American system does. And a ton of people coming in are high-skilled laborers, like software engineers, and so you have the situation where you have an oversupply of talent, and obviously that does one thing: it creates more competition for the same jobs, which drives wages down. Software engineers in Canada make a significant amount less than software engineers in the United States. It's not exactly rocket science. If you import 1 million people every single year to compete with Americans for those jobs, well then all of a sudden those jobs become less lucrative, less exclusive, and it creates a situation where the companies can now pay the workers less. And so I understand, if you're a patriot, why this would be so frustrating. Frankly, I think people should be frustrated because it feels like exploitation. And now, of course, there's an argument on the other side that it's not just the corporation's fault, it's more a result of circumstance. There's an argument being made by Vivek and other people that America's failing in its own workforce, and to a certain extent I think that is true. The education system is a complete disaster. Instead of creating a culture of academic excellence, we've bought into the system of participation trophies and leftist indoctrination. I think there is some truth that, we've created a system or a culture that doesn't exactly value the pursuit of excellence anymore, at least not the way the system used to. And now that's being used, I guess, as an excuse to argue that the American workforce should just be replaced by foreign workers. But that feels like a situation where we're making the right diagnosis, but we're not finding the right cure. The solution in that case isn't to replace American workers, but rather to fix the cultural rot that's created this broken situation at home in the first place. The solution should be to invest in the future American worker and to make sure that corporations put Americans first, rather than the unpatriotic view of just giving up on the American workforce. It just feels wrong. I think the use of labor immigration should be an absolute last resort, not the first option, which is what it feels like now. At the end of the day, I think most people could probably agree on one core principle, and that's that American workers should absolutely come first. That has to be the line in the sand. Immigration should be limited to exceptional, and I mean truly exceptional talent only. But obviously that's not happening when you have a lottery system. I think the system should make it incredibly difficult for corporations to hire foreign workers unless they've exhausted every other possible option to hire Americans. But that's not what's happening, and in a lot of these cases, you have major corporations that are working with these middleman contracting firms that get all these foreign students and foreign immigrants temporary H1B status, and then the big corporations are hiring talent through these middleman agencies. And it creates this weird system where you have foreign laborers working by proxy through middleman agencies, getting paid relatively low wages working for these corporations where they don't even necessarily have a clear path towards becoming American citizens. It's just an odd, overly complex, cheap foreign labor importation scheme. It just seems messed up. And the arguments defending the current system, honestly, don't necessarily appeal to me. It's always this argument of competing with foreign nations and chasing endless GDP growth. But at some point, the conversation has to go beyond that. Not everything is about the country's GDP, especially not when the chase for endless GDP growth comes at the detriment of American culture, the American people, and most importantly, values. And my value system tells me that the priority of the nation should probably be focused on rebuilding a culture that values hard work, excellence, and innovation. We want to compete with the world, we want to be the world leader, but we're not fostering the culture at home to be able to actually back that up. We're settling for mediocrity and relying on the importation of cheap labor to essentially prop us up. I don't know, it just doesn't sit well with me. I think what needs to happen is real reform to the education system and the labor system, enacting real change that puts American workers back where they belong, at the top and at the center of everything. And of course, me personally having that view, I understand why people are getting so frustrated. Well, kind of. I think the level of shock and surprise is a little bit unfounded, considering none of this is new. I mean, we know Elon Musk's stance on this issue and Vivek as well. They're both products of the American immigration system, two individuals who were given access to the American dream. We already knew their stances on these issues, so I don't know why people are so surprised, and even Donald Trump to a certain extent. His stance on the issue has been quite clear.
It's so sad when we lose people from Harvard, MIT, from the greatest schools, and lesser schools that are phenomenal schools also. What I want to do and what I will do is you graduate from a college, I think you should get automatically, as part of your diploma, a green card to be able to stay in this country. And that includes junior colleges, too. Anybody graduates from a college, you go in there for 2 years or 4 years. If you graduate or you get a doctorate degree from a college, you should be able to stay in this country. And you know more stories than I do, but I know of stories where people graduated from a top college or from a college, and they desperately wanted to stay here. They had a plan for a company, a concept, and they can't. They go back to India, they go back to China, they do the same basic company in those places, and they become multi-billionaires employing thousands and thousands of people, and it could have been done here. And a bigger example is you need a pool of people to work for your companies. You have great companies, and they have to be smart people. Not everybody can be less than smart. You need brilliant people. And we force the brilliant people, the people that graduate from college, the people that are number one in their class from the best colleges, you have to be able to recruit these people and keep the people. It was such a big deal. Somebody graduates at the top of the class. They can't even make a deal with the company because they don't think they're going to be able to stay in the country. That is going to end on day one.
People seem so surprised, but there's really nothing to be surprised about. But surprise aside, I understand why this debate has become so heated. It's a heated, emotional topic, I think, for good reason. And like I said earlier in the intro, I think it's high time we have this conversation. I think it's necessary, and I'm glad it's happening. And I know the left is going on, claiming the MAGA movement is falling apart. They're claiming the base is fracturing. But I don't think this is a sign of division. I think it's a sign of growth. It's time to have those tough conversations, and really, again, I think it shows the difference between left and right. You know, it seems almost as if liberals can't comprehend the fact that Trump supporters would have ideological differences with their leadership and actually challenge that leadership, because Democrats, as we know, they all just fall in line. Dissent is not allowed on the left. But on the right, we have vigorous debate, and this is a topic that should be debated relentlessly, and I'm glad we're finally having that conversation. And at the end of the day, I think it comes to balance. You gotta find the right ratios, the right numbers. The system has to be built in a way where the American worker comes first, and the importation of foreign labor is only used to truly fill in the little gaps. Anyways, those are pretty much my views. That's where I stand on the issue. That's what's on the mind. If you enjoyed the video, if you enjoyed my take, make sure to leave a like and possibly subscribe. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.